All right, Paul.
Hey, Fab.
Today's show is interesting. We call it our sales objectives real planning for 2022 because obviously objections are a thing forever, and I think it's important. I think it's important to have reps plan for next year, and obviously that's always. Honestly, it's probably a continuing education, right? You have to constantly get better and improve, but let's brand it as 2022 planning. So it's something interesting that you brought about. Our sales objections a real thing. What did you mean by that?
What do I mean by that? Yeah, I totally popped this one on Fab. Well, first of all, is planning for 2022 real? You should always be planning, but I know we always do it for the new year. But anyways, we'll talk about that afterwards. Well, it's interesting because I was listening to a podcast from a very good sales trainer in the States, and it was really interesting. And his point of view is that sales objectives are not real. They don't exist. People are always lying to you when they say no, or when it's never, the objection that's presented to you is never real. And I thought it was a little extreme because I do think that some objections are real. It's probably more about how you define the word objection, right? So an objection in my lexicon, ooh, fancy word, is, and maybe your lexicon too, and we'll decide. For me, an objection is when someone halts the process of moving forward for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking to someone and they want to take time to think about it, well, that's an objection. Mm-hmm. If they blatantly don't like your pricing and they tell you, that's an objection. I think we've talked about this before a few weeks ago where we said that 90% of the time they're not giving you the real reason up front, and that I believe is true, but there's still real objections. Yeah. What I think is happening is some people feel like they're on the spot and they're insecure and they're not ready to say yes right away. So they just, they put a hold on. Yeah. And they're not ready to go for it. But what this guy was saying is that if you've done your job properly up front, you've asked all the right questions and you're truly consultative, then there won't be any objectives because as you move along what's going forward. And I do certainly believe that that's a possibility, right? You can, if you're at a point where you're really asking good questions and you're really finding out what the client needs and you're moving forward, well, then the objection won't happen because you're getting the okay as you go along. It's sort of like if you and your partner are deciding to buy you and your decided to buy a house.
Wow, that was quite a slip right there.
I was thinking wife, but I said partner instead of wife. Because some people might have partner, they might have husbands instead of wives. So if you and your partner are thinking of buying a house, and your partner is not at the last minute going to say, "Oh, I've got an objection," right? Because usually, if they have an objection, it's because they're worried about something. If they didn't tell you, "Oh, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you," well, that they're breaking up with you. You know what I'm saying? So it's a big thing. So I do think that objections are real. What is often not real is what they're actually telling you.
Right.
Sometimes they don't even know. Mm-hmm. They have a feeling and they're like, I can't say yes yet. I don't really know why. But they won't tell you that. They'll just make something up. It doesn't feel right. I don't know about this car. I don't know about this SaaS. I don't know about this consulting. There's something that's telling me, I don't want to go forward with these people, so I'm going to make up some excuse to slow it down and see what it is, why my little radar is going off,
Right. Yeah, and I mean, but ultimately our objection is real. You're right. I mean, I guess technically if you ask the right questions, if you're disqualifying the right people, right? If you're disqualifying, there's no urgency, there's no critical event happening. This is all nice to have stuff. And if you decide to just end it there and you just kind of move on with the people that have the urgency and the critical events and then yeah, obviously you're limiting the number of objections that come up because you're disqualifying and you're really focusing on the right people. But I mean, life happens, right? Like, and we've all been there. You're speaking to who you believe is a decision maker because they believe they're the decision maker, but then it comes along and it's like, no, wait, there's actually, they have to run this by, purchasing first, right? And they didn't know that, and or their boss all of a sudden gets more interest, or their budget is way more than they had expected, and now they have to get it approved, or they don't know what the impact. Like there's a lot of things that happen.
A lot of things can happen that are going to bring up some points. But let's just go on a tangent for a second. What really happens most of the time when you're getting a sales objective is because you're trying to push too hard.
Yeah.
And that's what you should be thinking about. Why are you pushing so hard? Well, you said it this week, right? I was recording. You were here with me in the office, and I was recording a session, an online session, and you were saying, well, don't forget to mention that a lot of people, their state of mind is thrown off by the fact that they're getting a lot of pressure. Yeah, you want to be consultative. Yeah, I want you to ask open questions, but make sure you fucking close the deal. Right? So those two don't go together. So if you're pushing it, if you're trying to push it down the path all the time, if you're pushing your client, well, then you're probably going to get some form of objective because you're not really answering that person's questions to themselves as to whether you're really doing it for the right reason.
Right. Exactly. And it's really funny you said that, because it's exactly what I had in mind in terms of like an objection, which is often, you kind of move through your sales process too fast, right? Like, okay, let's do the demo, like discovery, and then we'll do the demo today. And they're like, because that you have a quota to attain, or your pipeline is dry, or, and sometimes it's more of a, I don't know if it's a positive thing. I wouldn't put it that way, but sometimes let's say, there's a price increase coming along, and you're really trying to get people like, oh, this is a huge motivator, right? Price is going up, like, and so you're trying to push people like, the price is going up, like December 1st or like January 1st, like sign out. But then people are like, whoa, I don't even know if I need all this. Yeah. Like, so I think, I think you're completely right. I think ultimately objections do often come from you speeding up the sales process. Obviously, like we said, life changes, right? The person you're speaking to leaves the company, and then the other person's like skeptical. Like, there's a lot, and you have to restart your sales process and all that stuff. Like life happens, of course, but.
And the natural, human psychology, talk to a psychologist if you know any, and you'll realize that, people rather live with the broken that they know, most people, than to face the risk of change, right? So in sales, we believe in what we're doing. We're often trying to get people to change something, but we have to get them over the barrier of them wanting to stay with what they know that is broken. They're driving that old, 1953 Studebaker. The clutch is broken and one wheel's falling off, but they know this car super well. Well, maybe not a 1953 Studebaker, but anyways, they're driving something old because that's a classic and it's probably worth money. So they're driving something old, but they don't want to change what they're driving because they're used to it. It does what they want it to do, and they're really happy with it. Actually, it's a really bad analogy. Everyone wants to change cars. So, but something you're used to, process you're used to at work, or the way that you function, and you're trying to instill a new SaaS or whatever it might be. So people are reticent because they're saying, "Oh man, I'm a little worried about what this is." So you really have to ask the right questions and make sure that you're touching on the right points to convince those people. But if you feel you got pressure in the background, then you're just pushing it along because you've got deadlines and whatnot. Well, that's when the objections come up, because the guy's saying, well, for whatever reason, or she's feeling like this person's putting pressure on me, and you know what? I don't want to react to this pressure. I don't want to deal with the consequences. So I'm gonna hold back.
Okay. And so to try to loop it back to the planning for 2022.
I hate when you do that.
Is no, because you brought up something good, right? Like the pressure to do, and like that's the reality. Like we've all been in these sales.
I actually brought up something that you brought up, so just so you know,
yeah. No, I know, but I'm like, we've all been either in or working with these sales departments where it's like, yeah, we want to do this consultative sales approach. It's like, but there is this pressure, and so there's kind of this chicken and the egg thing, right? It's like, right, we want to be consultative. And we see this with marketing as well, and with a whole bunch of stuff. Is like, yes, we want to drive inbound leads. Yes, creating content takes a while. Yes, it takes a while to get traction from your podcast. Yes, but it's all great to do that. But the reality is I still have a business to run and revenue targets and paychecks and stuff like that. And so there is a difficulty of changing, right? Like there is a certain change management that has to happen where it's like, fine, let's be consultative, Paul. I agree with you. Let's be more consultative. However, the only way we've gotten this far is by pushing and pressuring and doing whatever, and just getting salespeople that are hungry enough to do almost anything, whatever it takes to close the deal. Like why, how I'm going to, the impression is like, now I need to take my step off the accelerator and my foot off the accelerator and slow down and be more consultative. It's not an easy change to do. So what can we potentially do to help our reps slow down and not push people going forward?
If you're a manager, you have to realize too that when you're putting pressure on a representative, that pressure is being applied in the right way. And let me give you an analogy to drive it home. Like if your kid is late for school every morning because he gets up late, right? And then, he takes a shower and everything, and then he gets in the car and drives to school. And you say, you got to stop being late to school. And he still takes all the same time to get ready, but he drives like a maniac on the highway. It's not a good solution, right? Yeah. Now, what you're really hoping he'll do is drive the same on the highway, but take less time to get ready in the morning. Maybe he has a shower the night before. So that's what you got to make sure as a sales manager, that you're not asking your people to speed on the highway.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that you're telling them, do more activity, keep taking your time, ask the right questions, so that your pipeline will come to the right solution, the right results, rather than you just applying pressure and letting them do, something that might be reckless, which is pushing the sale along, right? Mm-hmm. But that's what as human beings, that's what tends to happen, right? Because our priorities in the wrong place. I even remember one of my sales managers saying, I've always said this, and maybe I'm naive, but I've always wanted to help my clients.
Yeah.
I've never been someone who can sell something that I don't feel that my client needs. I've never been able to do that. Yeah. And I've had a few sales managers, I won't give their names or say when, who would say, I don't really give a crap if it's as good for the client or not. I just want to make my commission.
Yeah.
But people feel that. And when people feel that, they don't want to deal with you.
No.
And
I'd argue
never ends well.
I'd argue, like, and maybe I'm being too idealist here, but they're feeling it more and more, right? Like Gary Vaynerchuk was like mentioned it like a long time ago. It was like some people's bullshit radars are through the roof right now, right? Like we've been exposed to so much spammy stuff, right? I was on a call today with a client, and like he interrupted the call because he interrupted our Zoom because he had a call coming in. There was one of those spam calls, right? Like Canada Revenue Agency is blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like we're so exposed to
that's so much fun with them.
We're so exposed to all of that this and the reality is more and more software gets purchased, right? Like Amazon has become like a second nature, but as a B2B buyer, you're almost expecting now that your B2B purchasing process will be as simple as purchasing something on Amazon. So if you're just putting pressure and it's like, well, you know what? Reality is I'm going to go see another CRM or I'm going to go see another accounting software. If you're just too annoying, like unless you're the only one in the market, like you're only LinkedIn or you're like clearly number one and there's really no other options, you're going to go look elsewhere, right? And the people that are like in this monopoly position are far and few in between.
Yeah. No, and it's and it really boils down to that. So really what we're saying is that the objections you're getting is usually because you're rushing your sales process, and you're usually rushing your sales process because it's either self-inflicted pain because you're wanting to make some commission, or you're feeling pressure. But really, what it boils down to, and I've said this many times in many of our podcasts, but you've got to go slow to go fast. And I didn't make that up. I heard it from someone in the past who said, take your time in your discovery, take your time in your sales process to do the steps properly, because that extra 10 minutes or that extra half hour or that extra hour or that extra day is usually multiplied by 10 or 15 at the back end as to how quickly you're going to close a sale, because you're taking more time up front to make sure that you're listening to the person. I was doing a role play. I've been doing role plays with a few people lately in sales, and I'll say to people, okay, we're role playing the discovery part. And I'll say to people, open-ended questions. They'll say, yeah, I get it. And they'll ask me one open-ended question, or two open-ended questions. And then boom, they go into their sales pitch. Like this, it's amazing. It's amazing. There's something else here. We can talk about it next time, because I'm totally going off on a tangent. But it's amazing how you forget the reason you're there, which is to make your client feel comfortable with what they need to achieve, and comfortable with the fact that you can help them get there.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say, but if you're getting a bunch of objections, it probably is because you're not asking the right questions and you're not taking your time enough in the discovery call. So Are objections real? Yes. And if you really do a good job, are they going to go away? Yes, because you'll deal with them as they go along.
Right.
For example, if you spend a long time with someone and you're asking a bunch of questions and you're really finding out what it is that they're trying to achieve, you're really getting into the detail, right? And you spent like a half an hour or an hour or 3 hours, 2 days, and they've given you a laundry list of things, and you're thinking to yourself, there's so much I can do here.
Yeah.
Right. There's so much I can help them with. And through this, you've quantified it, and you know the value of their opportunity or of the problem that they need to solve. And man, I've got a solution that's going to help them on the right path. And you're just confident of it. And you come back, and before you even present, you say, hey, if I fix this, that, and all these things you mentioned, is there any reason that you wouldn't go forward with the solution? And most people will say, well, no, or, just found out that I'm no longer the decision maker. Like you said before, I've got to talk to the three of, okay, so that's a reason, and they'll be honest with you,
Yeah.
Or no, this is great. We're excited to hear the solution because we want to move forward. Yesterday, I was asked to join a business club, and I was asked to and I was given all the parameters, and it's an intelligent business club. The price is right, and the guy said, "Was there any reason you wouldn't join?" I said, "No, it makes sense.
Yeah,
it's got everything." And as a buyer, and I'm sure you do too, I look for that. I look for people who are going to take the time to understand what I need, right? So are objections real? Yes. If you don't do your job properly, or if you really don't take the time to go deep. And then we also talked about why you don't go deep. Okay, you wanted to talk about planning for 2020.
No, but I think, let's tie it up. We're coming up on the 20-minute mark here, but I think you said it.
20 minutes?
What's that, sorry?
We blow up at 20 minutes?
Yeah, yes. We self-destruct.
Your kids burst in the room.
Yeah, sitting there at the door, like 2 more minutes. I think you said it. I think in terms of planning for next year, I think if you're realizing that you're getting a lot of objections, if you're losing a lot of deals because the reason is like you're too expensive, or it's not the right time, or like a lot of the typical reasons why you normally get flagged as a lost deal, it's not a right fit, or they don't have enough employees, whatever your segmentation is. If it's like related to pricing and stuff that's more controllable in a way, I think you need to, and I really like the analogy you gave about, your kid getting ready to school, and you don't want them to speed on the highway. You want them to figure out a way to get ready earlier the next day. And that's perfect. You're like, well, why are we getting all these objections? And it seems to be pointing that one major reason, let's not call it everything, is that your salespeople are pushing too much too quickly. And then let's take a step, like, why are they doing that? Well, are my targets realistic? Are they getting enough leads? Are they, like, there's a lot of reasons why somebody might be pushing too much.
And also,
and then work to solve that, right? Like
I want to stop you there because I've got to say I was a rep for a long time. I still represent my own company, so I'm still a rep in that sense. A lot of that's excuses. A lot of it is that kid being slow in the morning and speeding on the highway. It's because we're procrastinating, we're disorganized, we're doing what we need to. Some of it is pressure. Let's call it 50-50. 50%.
Right, but isn't that also a sign that there's no accountability built into the sales team, right? If your reps can procrastinate, is because there's a sales leader somewhere that's not tracking sales activities or having sit downs with their reps, or right, or maybe it could be, and I was talking to somebody else today, it could be purely, it's hard to say, but let's be dramatic here, purely operational, right? Where your CRM is just not set up, and it's like, it takes me 15 minutes to like update one deal after
that's an unadulterated plug.
No, but you know what I mean? Like, and it could be operational. It could be like, this makes no sense. Like, this stage in our sales space, this makes no sense.
You're right, Fab. So it could be operational. It could be organizational. Look, I was just talking to someone, was it yesterday? It wasn't with you. It was either after we spoke last week or whatever. And they were saying that their CRM, the CRM is such a heavy duty, hard to use, improperly installed thing that it's just this big sluggish. It's almost like they have this huge car, and instead of putting gas in it, they're pushing it down the highway, and you're right, it could be operational. And if that's the case, there's three choices, right? So there's the leader that's too pushy, that's not getting the right amount of he's not connecting with their people's motivation. And then there's the individual who's just procrastinating. And then there's a reality of the market. Maybe you got a really crappy product, who knows? But, these are all things that you have to contend with, and you have to figure it out, right? So if you're a smart salesperson, or if you're a smart leader, you say, okay, this is our product. We're not top of the line. We're not the worst. We're mid-market. So who is it that we're mid-quality. So who is it we're trying to go after? And it's all about being organized and understanding what you're trying to do and having realistic expectations. Listen, I was a rep too, and I remember when I was in media like 10 or 15 years ago, and even before that, 20 years ago, and they'd come down with the new objectives for the year, and you'd be like, give me a break, we're never going to hit that. And often we didn't, and it was a way for them to satisfy the shareholders, and there was this whole the political bullshit behind it, and that could happen too, right? Because media at that time was this really small margin business, and they were trying to impress the shareholders because that was a way to get money in a business that was like flatlining. Yeah. So there's a bunch of reasons. This being said, if we can roll it back into the objections, figure out why you're pushing too hard, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're pushing too hard, that's where you're going to get objections. Because if you're not pushing and you're asking the right questions, this guy in the State's right in that if you go as you go along and you're really a partner with the person you're having a conversation with, they're going to, I wish I remembered his name, I'd give him a free plug. You're going to have the right relationship so that the person can be honest as you go along.
Right. Yeah, and you said it, and I think ultimately it's like, sure, understand why you're pushing too hard, right? Like you said, it could be, they're all boiled down to leadership, right? Leadership pushing too much, leadership not holding their team accountable, or leadership not checking to see that their systems are actually set up to help. But I think at the end, and then at the end of the day, one of the bigger solutions to be able to manage that transition is, putting more leads into the pipeline, right? Like, there's less pressure when there's more leads in the pipeline. And how do we do that next year, right? How do we do that in 2022? How do we get more leads into our pipeline? I think is a good first step, right? As we're analyzing why we're pushing too hard, we're giving our reps and our sales bandwidth. And I realize it's easy for me to say here, like 5 minutes before we end, put more leads. All right, boom. It's hard, but there's a strategy involved, and I think that's often underestimated by a lot of people. They said, "Oh, we'll just put another sales body in here, and it'll be good," right?
But and I agree with you. If you put more leads in the pipeline, it'll definitely help. But are you then? I was having this conversation with someone last week, or saying, look, you can put a bunch of leads in the pipeline. If your salespeople are not properly trained and your closing ratio is like 2, 3, 4, 5% lower than it could be, you're missing out on a ton of opportunity.
Right. But they're not mutually exclusive, right? Like it's just going back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is like this change management is difficult, whereas like we've grown so far by pushing. Like now you want me to slow down and ask better questions, but my pipeline isn't full enough to alleviate the stress from leadership. So let's work on getting better salespeople and a better process and better tools, but let's work on also making sure that we have more people to talk to.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome, Paul. This is a good impromptu series on planning 2022.
Yeah, well, what I've noticed often, Fab, is when we have these conversations, we have a title, but a lot of things tie into each other, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We do talk about one specific aspect of sales, but really, if you're not looking at the global picture, you can't look at it, prescriptively with just one thing. You've got to look at how it affects the other aspects of your process.
Yeah.
Methodology.
Awesome, Paul. Have a good day.
Ciao, Fab.
See you next week. Bye, everybody.
Probably before next week, but not on Monday.